We have privilege of having Nate Andersen here, who's been working in Africa for the last 6 years. He's currently in Kenya and Zambia, and he can't decide which place he's supposed to be, so he just goes back and forth between the two of them. So I will let him take it from here. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Good morning, church. Get out my notes so I don't wander too far off into the bushes. All right. So yeah, as Dustin said, my name is Nate Andersen. I am Dan and Lynette's oldest, and I have the privilege of working in East and Southern Africa. Presently working both in Kenya and in Zambia doing agriculture development missions. The way that we treat the world around us says a lot about who we believe God to be. And so as we are sharing with people, ministering, as we are in the fields beside people working, we get to share more about our Creator and what He has for us. So I don't especially love talking about what I do, so I'm going to make that part real short. And then I'd love to share with you some stories of people that I get to work with on the ground. And this is really where the rubber meets the road, is locals that love the Lord and have a passion for serving their own people. And I get to support and encourage them. And that's really the bulk of what I have the privilege to do. So in the last year, a lot of the coordinating and things that I've done has meant drilling 2 wells in a community that has had the worst drought in 40 years. We are now providing fresh, clean drinking water for over 500 people, and we've been able to do that in the last year. Because we do agriculture development, the farm that I have in Zambia has produce. We are doing research to develop new varieties of crops and new methodologies for growing. But then what do we do with the produce? We have a partner school in town that I'm going to tell you a bit more about in a bit. But this year, we were able to supply over 1,000 school lunches and counting. We still have food that is going to the school as we speak. The goal, probably in about 5 years' time, is to be able to supply school lunch for every child every day that they are at school. It's going to be about 36,000 school lunches that we will be working towards. We're in the process of building a research and training center, so there's about 13 different buildings that are going up on the farm this year between storage and general facilities, staff housing, and student housing, where we can come train young individuals in discipleship and in agriculture methodology. So all of those buildings are coming up. This is a year of preparation for, hopefully, decades to come. So that's most of the Zambia side. And then because I have incredible difficulty with work permits, I end up bouncing around. So I also have the opportunity of working with an existing ministry in Kenya called Africa Hope. And I've been helping to develop their agriculture research and development wing. And this last year, we've been designing and building out a 50-acre farm to help the local Maasai population that is being forced to transition from their traditional semi-nomadic pastoralism to a more settled agrarian type of living and business. So it's a huge shift that is being pushed by the local government without much resource access to be able to do that. So we're trying to step in and help with the transition that somebody else is forcing and being able to share the love of Christ in the midst of that. So there is a Eastern Oregon looking hay barn that is going up at the moment that is quite the talk of the village. So it becomes these conversation pieces that we can begin to talk with people about. Where are we going? How do we find hope? A lot of the places where I grew up in the States. This happened 150 years ago, so how do we deal with this transition now in Kenya so we can share hope in the midst of difficult places? So that's plenty about what I actually do, but let me share with you 3 stories of individuals that I get to work with. The first of which is a man by the name of Sam Ngambi. And I met Sam when I first went to Zambia in 2019 and started working there. Sam has a first, second, third, sixth, and seventh grade education. When he was in third grade, his father moved them far out into the bush, and he was more than 20 miles from the nearest school, and everyone has to walk. There's not exactly school buses in eastern Zambia in the bush. And so at that point, he stopped going to school and just grew up in the bush with his family, working there until he was an adult, and then he moved closer to town and got married. But he decided that I want to go back to school. I want to learn. I want to know more. And so he went to the local school and said, I want to go back to school. And the head teacher said, what grade do you want to go to? And he said, 6 sounds good. So they said, 6 it is. So Sam was able to go to 6th grade and 7th grade, but by that time they had had their first child, and the pressure of finances and caring for a family became too much to continue with school, so he had to stop again at that point. So, very low educational access, but this man has a love for learning and teaching and discipling others. He speaks 5 languages, and he taught himself English next to a Bimba Bible. Bimba isn't even his first language. So using a second language to teach himself a third language because he wanted to learn and to communicate and share with other people. So when I met Sam, he was also a self-taught builder. But because of his faithfulness and skills, he was being hired on in the community to do larger projects, but had this huge heart for discipleship. And so the agriculture ministry that I worked with in Zambia at the time said, Sam, come on. Come with us, and we will provide opportunity for you to disciple young people as you continue your journey. So without much agriculture experience, he was able to come on board and start teaching and discipling young people who were learning how to farm in a way that was honoring to God. And so he still, to this day, continues that process. Back in 2020, we had COVID, and that caused a few things to go sideways. And so a lot of the regular training programs that we had going on weren't able to continue. And so I was spending a lot of time out in the village just with my friends wandering around. And he came to me one day and said, Mr. Nati, one day I want to build a shop here in the village so that I can teach my young friends how to build and how to weld, how to make things well. And I have a small plot. Maybe a 12 by 14 shop, but I just don't have the money to build this shop. Maybe someday I will get to the resources to build this shop and I can bless other people in my community. And I said, Sam, look around you. We're in the village, it's Africa, there's no recycling system, there's no system, and so there's glass bottles and plastic bottles and all sorts of trash just around. It's like, Sam, why are you complaining? We have building materials right here. So I sat with him and we started making eco bricks. You can take old plastic bottles for your Fanta and Coke and whatever else, and if you shove smaller plastics inside, they become hard and plump up, and you can actually use them like bricks and build the shop. And you can use glass bottles in the wall, and it acts like little lights in the wall. So we were able to build this shop to bless the community from trash. How often are our own lives like that? We see ourselves as dirty and broken down and worthless. Nobody can do anything with me. I have nothing to offer. But who does Jesus say that we are? He sees us in the midst of our dirtiness, our trash, and says, no, I am going to redeem you. I am going to turn you into something beautiful that people admire. And so that's what we did with the shop. And that's what Sam gets to do with people in that community. At the beginning of this year, he was in a terrible motorcycle accident. He was on his way to town to buy more materials for the shop, and a car pulled out right in front of him. We weren't sure he was going to make it. He was in an ICU for weeks. And he pulled through. He was determined, and he pulled through. When he made it back to the village, the friend that he had been teaching and training to run the shop had stolen everything from him. All of the materials were gone, all of the money was gone, he was back to zero. He had the machinery and nothing else. And so what would most of us do at that point? Quit, shut the doors, walk away, and never have anything to do with it again. But he didn't. He said, all right, Mr. Nate, can you help me get going again? And so we did. We have another friend that has a school in town that I'm going to talk about next. And so we gave him the contract to build the window frames and the door frames for the school. And so now he's back up on his feet and he is moving again. And we've also contracted him to be the builder for all of the student housing and visitor housing at the farm. And so he's back up and he is moving again, regaining strength, and he's never lost hope through all of this. So again, what I do is very little, but what people like Sam get to do, that makes an enormous difference in these communities. Teaching his kids, teaching young people in the community, and showing what hope and faith in Christ really looks like. How do we forgive when people steal from us in the worst situation in our lives? But he chose to forgive, and he continues to be an example in the community today. Now, my second friend that I want to share a little bit about is a man by the name of Ernest, Mr. Mushalila. And Ernest is a crazy person. I have never met anybody that can get anything done as quickly and efficiently as Ernest. Things tend to move rather slowly in Eastern and Southern Africa and don't move along terribly quickly, but Ernest, as soon as you give him an opportunity, things are done. Now, Ernest, I met a few years ago, and when he was a kid, he had polio. And so he has one leg that is bent at a strange angle, and he's not able to do regular physical labor like what is required of a lot of people. And because he doesn't have the best mobility, he isn't able to do a hard physical job, and he wasn't able to have a very high level of education, he found himself begging on the street. There was nothing else that he could do. But he realized one day, either I'm going to spend the rest of my life sitting here on the side of the road begging, asking other people for their money, or I can do something to help people like me. So in 2015, he decided he was going to start a school for orphans, children with disabilities, and other very needy children in the community. When I met him, so he had started in 2014, 2015 with 7 students, not charging any school fees, raising money every month from the local businesses to run the school. When I met him in 2019, he had 200 students across 7 grades. No outside support, nothing else. They were renting a small 3-bedroom house, and they were teaching 200 students in this 3-bedroom house. See all the little kids scrunched up there, jammed in next to each other trying to learn. But he was making it work. He was serving people in need, people that would end up in the same situation as him. But he said, no, I can help people like me. And so over the last 3 or 4 years, we've come alongside of Ernest and said, hey, let's help you develop this into something. And so one year, we were able to buy a piece of land. Ernest had found a plot in town that was available for sale, but he didn't have the funds to be able to do it. So we went to the man and had talked with him, and he said, I have been waiting for you to come. This is your piece of land to be able to use for the school. So we were able to purchase this piece of land, a place where they could actually call home instead of worrying about rent from month to month and teaching 200 students in a space that is a third or a quarter the size of this building. The second year, we were able to build an office block and a storage building and a preschool. And as of November last year, they were able to move into their first proper classroom block. So now there are 3 classrooms that are coming along, and the bricks are being made for the next 4 classrooms. So each grade, by this time next year, will have their own classroom. When I met Ernest, he was a Jehovah's Witness. And so it's like, oh, how do we work with this? How do I work with someone who doesn't believe Jesus is who he says he is? This is going to be tricky. And in a lot of sub-Saharan Africa, it's not something where you just go and you ration with people. We live in a culture where if you can reason with me, if you can show me all of these things, write it out and argue it out, that's how many of us believe. But most of sub-Saharan Africa is incredibly relational. Your relationship with me matters far more than what you know or even what I know. And so after several years of working with Ernest, we started having conversations about who does the Bible say that Jesus really is? Who does Jesus say that he is? And so we were able to walk through this, and he's like, Mr. Nate, nobody has ever told me this. Why has nobody ever told me this? You are right. Now I must tell everyone. And so as he goes around, he is able to share boldly and openly in a way that I never could. But because I have relationship with him, because I am able to walk alongside of him, I can build and encourage him, and then he in turn is able to impact hundreds, potentially thousands more people than I ever could. Faithfulness matters. Faithfulness matters. I don't have anything. I don't have this. I don't have that. We like to make excuses. Well, if I just had a bit more, fill in the blank. I could serve. I could do this. Nah. Ernest, Sam, they quite literally had nothing. Sam, more than once. But they chose to make the most of what they had been given. And they are thriving and they are serving because of that. Now, Kenya, I haven't been there quite as long, and so I don't get to claim as much kind of personal connection there. But there's another young man that I've had the pleasure of working with over the last year that has a similar story. Meshach Kasale grew up in a children's home. His father died when he was very young, and his mother couldn't take care of the 4 children out in the village where they were at. So between personality and the children's home, Meshach grew up without any social skills. Couldn't take a joke, couldn't take criticism, just was really difficult to engage and interact with. But through some sponsorship and some help along, he was able to finish his accounting degree and started working with the ministry that I have the pleasure of working with called Africa Hope. And so over the years, as Tim, the director, has worked with him, another Maasai, a guy from Kenya that is running a ministry for over 20 years there, has really coached and encouraged and built up Meshach to the point now where he is very personable, and he actually leads one of the ministries that Africa Hope has. Every year, Africa Hope brings in a group of young people within the community to do business training. So often here, a lot of our businesses are based on Christian values, whether we acknowledge it or realize it or not. So much of the way we do business is based on Christian values. And a lot of Africa, it is not. Steal what you can, when you can, how you can. And so the whole idea of running a Christian business, a business built on integrity and values on quality, is something that is missing for a lot of people. There's a very big disconnect between our faith and the way we do things in life. And so Meshach now has the opportunity to train dozens of young people on how to run a business in a way that honors God, that builds people up, so that people are able to share who God is in the way that they run business. In the same way that I get to teach people in agriculture, how do we get to serve God through agriculture? How do we honor God through the way that we farm? He is able to do the same thing through business. And it's because people invested in him over years. Who are we investing in? God has a position and a place and a plan for each one of us, good works that he has prepared ahead of time. For me, that looks like being in sub-Saharan Africa, working with people in agriculture and business and discipleship. What does it look like for you? What does God have for you? For some of us, in the stages of life that we're in, that means praying and supporting others. And so the work that I do is supported by you guys. I don't have a paid position in the ministry that I work. I fully raise all of the funds to go and to be able to serve in 2, 3, 4 countries sometimes. Helping people like Sam. Helping people like Ernest. Helping people like Meshach grow and thrive in what they are doing. And so as my position over the years has grown, the need for support in that has also grown. So I ask you guys, please pray for me and pray for these ministries. Pray for Sam, for Ernest, for Meshach, for Africa Hope and the things that they are doing in their communities. And I would ask that you would consider supporting financially as well. What I do costs money. And with the way these ministries have grown and working in 2 countries now, the need for support has increased as well. And so at the moment, I am in need of a 4-wheel drive vehicle for Kenya, getting out in the bush. A lot of places that I work, roads are more of a suggestion than a reality. So having something quality is kind of not an option. I remember a few years ago I was chatting with a friend of mine, and he said, we had a missionary that said, I am not here to be a missionary to my vehicle. I am here to work with people, not on my vehicle. And so I have that. I would rather be out with people than sitting underneath the hood of a janky car trying to fix it. So I'm in need of about $20,000 to get the proper vehicle for the conditions that I'm in. Kenya, you guys think that the U.S. is tax happy. Come visit Kenya and you'll see what tax happy really looks like. My boss says that every time you buy a vehicle, you buy the government one as well. So that is part of the additional cost to what I'm doing is the tax component. So that is about $20,000 in additional funds that I need to get a proper vehicle for going out and serving in the areas that I do. In addition to that, there are ongoing costs as ministry increases in multiple places. I'm in need of about $1,500 a month to top up with what is needed at the moment. So I would ask you to prayerfully consider. 1, pray regularly. For the church here in the valley, for those here in this building, and the church globally. We are not alone. The church is far bigger than us. But I would also ask that you put your money where your mouth is. Vote with your feet. Vote with your dollars. Last night, my brother asked me to read a passage from Colossians. And the last verse, I think, is a very good reminder for us today where we are at. Colossians 3:17 says, whatever you do, whether in speech or action, do it all in the name of Lord Jesus, and give thanks to God the Father through him. Thank you.